Many thanks to Felix Rection Squad, Clash from the servers, Sergeant Pepper's servers, Sea of Doors Cloud, Dallas, the Struggle Community, the Karma Crew servers, Dots, Designful, and Friendly a DayZ podcast for making this video possible. DayZ 1.28 comes with loot changes across all maps and adds some new item spawn locations too, so we're going to be checking out the kind of gear that we can get at all the new dynamic events, which dynamic events are likely to be added to other maps in the future, and how the devs responded to your weapon durability concerns. Most of the changes this patch are to weapon spawn locations and spawn amounts, so basically how many of each weapon spawns on each map. Starting on the best map, which is Chernarus, the M16 will spawn twice as often and the USG-45 and mag spawns more too. The Scorpion and its mag has been moved up a tier to tier 3 instead of 2, and the ST5K will spawn in tier 2 and 3 instead of just 2, and I guess this was done to make room for the Rack 37 added this patch. If you want to get both your hands on a very nice rack, 20 of them will spawn in tier 1 and 2 in police locations, with a 15 round mag spawning with it, but the 25 round mag spawns one tier higher in 2 and 3. The new beast of a shotgun, the R12, is a similar story but spawns in tier 2 plus police locations, so it spawns 6 spawning across the whole of Chernarus in these locations here, no longer spawning at dynamic police cars like they did on experimental. As for the new optics, they're all found in these locations on Chernarus, with the black ones spawning at dynamic police cars only, making these police cars a lot better for loot this patch. To make room on the loot table for the new sport point sites, the hunting optic has been moved up a tier, so it's only going to be found in tier 3 hunting locations now, or the green blobs inside the purple area shown here. The PSO1 will be harder to find too, now spawning 10 per server instead of 15, I guess to make way for the PSO6, which is a new optic for these weapons, spawning in tier 3 plus military, with all these weapons here getting spawn amount changes too. From these changes and how SMGs have less recoil this patch, it would seem that the devs want SMGs to be a stepping stone from low tier weapons to assault rifles, as the AK-74 was pretty common last patch and yet ranks among the best weapons in the game. As you can see here, this means that SMGs are going to be the middle ground between assault rifles and the low tier trash you find on the coast. Moving on to Livonia, similar changes have been made here too, but to a lesser extent I would say. So the SMGs and the SMG mag spawn more, with the Vega spawning 40% more often, but the M16 will spawn a little less, with the SKS spawning a lot less. The hunting optic changes are the same on Chernarus 2, spawning tier 3 hunting locations, so you'll need to go to the south of the map to get a hunting optic, which makes way for the sport point sites I assume, with the other optics spawning in these locations here. So the Black Marksman scope spawns at dynamic police cars only, like it does on Chernarus, which is where you'll also find the rack, because the rack will only spawn at dynamic police cars on Livonia, yet both the rack mags are found in all the police locations, where the R12 is spawning exactly where it is on Chernarus, which is tier 2 plus police. Finally, moving on to Sakhal, the rack, its mags and the R12 are only going to be found at dynamic police cars, but I'd argue that police cars on this map are easier to find on any other map because you can just go around the main road, which would make this map, I guess, the best place to get the new guns and the mags. It's also easier to find the marksman scope on Sakhal too, with the tan and the green variant spawning in the special loot tag located here. The special loot tag is basically where NBC gear spawns on this map, and all 3 of them will spawn inside dynamic containers too, so while only one of each will spawn on the map, dynamic containers can give you additional ones, with the keys being easier to find because they spawn more due to the new dynamic events now, which we'll get into soon. For now, the hunting optic spawns less to make way for the spore point again like on other maps, and Sakhal is the best map to find the new PSO6 optic, as it spawns in tier 3 military, spawning at the new military related dynamic events and dynamic containers too. Dynamic container keys will respawn more often, so instead of every 4 hours, it's now 1 hour in this patch, and the Blaze, CR527 and Mosin have had their spawn amounts changed. The Russian version of the night vision optical attachment, the one that goes on the guns, was moved to military related dynamic events only, and finally, to finish off the loot changes this patch, the 2 Deagle variants and the mag no longer spawns on Sakhal, probably because 357 loose ammo was never actually spawning on this map. Sakhal now has 4 additional dynamic events on top of police cars, dynamic containers and the frozen scientist. The 4 additional dynamic events include heli crashes, patrol boats, fishing boats and ambulances. These all work exactly the same as other dynamic events in DayZ, and that a certain amount of them will be active at these spawn points at any one time. So starting with helis, up to 3 of these can be active at any one time in any of these locations, so only the southwest of the map. They make the exact same crash sound as on other maps, but you're only going to find the MI8 or Russian version on this map, and they spawn with military infected and military loot drops too. The loot found here is all military tiers on this particular map, but not gear that is exclusive to dynamic containers, so dynamic containers are still better for loot. However, shipwreck loot is actually classified as tier 4 loot, which means everything that can be found at the shipwreck will also spawn at wrecked helis too, including shipping container keys. Now, the number of keys found on a server hasn't been increased, so in a way this diminishes the need to go to the shipwreck for these keys, but because wrecked helis spawn on Shantar 2, you might as well go over there to loot the shipwreck if you can be bothered. It's quite far away from these spawn points, but nonetheless the shipwreck is still a great place to loot. The problem is, you might not find the keys at the shipwreck because they might be at a heli instead. Moving on to patrol boats, otherwise known as military boats, a new type of dynamic event and the first one we've ever seen on water. These boats are not drivable though, and don't even bob up and down in the water with the waves, which indicates that they're probably not going to be drivable either. Their intended purpose then is to only spawn loot, spawning the exact same gear that heli crashes do on Sakhal, just with fewer spawn points to get gear, but you can find container keys here too, and the spawn points are all around the main island and Barakan, so if you do get lucky and you spawn near one, you might be able to get container keys or a nice weapon from the spawn point, but they are more concentrated around Barakan area. If you want to concentrate on these, go to Barakan, with a huge 15 of these spawning at once per server. I believe 15 of these spawn for two reasons. One is because these boats are pretty damn difficult to see from the coast unless you get some elevation or if you have some sort of good optic, due to most of them being nestled between ice sheets in most cases, and two, because less gear will spawn here compared to helis, but they're still very much worth looting to get those container keys alone. To get to one of these, you will certainly need to get wet in most cases, as they're often not next to ice sheets to jump from, and usually to get on ice sheets anyway, you have to go in water first, so bring some warmth with you, or you can light a fire on the boat to stabilize your temperature for the return trip. This isn't so much the case for the new dynamic fishing boats, the third dynamic event in this patch, which oftentimes spawns right next to ice sheets or even right next to land. This model though is exactly identical to the medium-sized fishing boat that was already in the game in previous patches, which spawns a lot less gear compared, and may confuse players that don't really know the difference between these. The only difference that I found is that dynamic fishing boats will always spawn with their mast pointing straight up, as they spawn completely fixed vertically, whereas one that doesn't spawn much loot, or rather the ones that we had before, are usually beached and therefore slightly tilted. So if the mast is tilted, that means it's not a dynamic event, it's just a regular static one. But I do believe that this needs some distinction, as sometimes there's absolutely no difference between these two. The loot you'll find here is civilian gear, ammo and weapons from all loot tiers, so you can find some very nice warm gear here, but not really much else. Weapons and ammo are quite rare here, and given that most of them spawn quite far from land in a lot of cases, they're not really worth hunting down, I'd say. It's kind of like a bonus if you're searching for the military boats across ice sheets, also spawning 15 per server, but don't get your hopes up, these boats are not great. The final dynamic event, dynamic ambulances, spawn the main island only, and there's going to be 10 of these at any one time in these potential locations. Most of the time these ambulances will spawn alone, so there's not going to be like police cars and wrecked vehicles near them. There's just going to be an ambulance there, kind of like police cars on Sakhal really, and you will find medical infected surrounding them, or at least you should. Like the other new dynamic events, ambulances will spawn all tiers of their respective loot category, which in this case is medical loot, so you can find the filtering bottle here, and it's certainly worth looting if you do spot one just for that reason, but you also get the bonus of medicine spawning here too. Ambulances despawn and respawn every 30 minutes, but won't disappear in front of you because you need to be a minimum distance away from it for it to even start respawning, and the same goes for all other types of dynamic event in DayZ. So for helis, it's 35 minutes before they despawn if you're not nearby, and both types of the new dynamic boats, it's every 45 minutes, meaning it's a good idea to prioritize looting dynamic events rather than saving them for later. As for the tire fire, which I made an entire damn video about, it's actually just a seasonal event for Sakhal. It's the version of the bonfire, the one that you find on Chernarus and Livonia, but this one is just a different model for Sakhal, only spawning it around the end of April every year for a few weeks. And I mentioned that supply crates might be coming to Sakhal, but none are spawning currently. I said supply crates were coming this patch because they were added to the server files of Sakhal this patch, with Chernarus and Livonia also getting some changes this patch too. In summary, it would appear that Chernarus might be getting these patrol or military boats, and Livonia is potentially getting patrol boats, fishing boats, and ambulance dynamic events. However, until we see these added to maps, because they're not actually on those maps right now, this is just speculation, but it would make a lot of sense for these new dynamic events to be on other maps too. What also makes sense is for weapons like the M4 to last longer than 286 rounds. With the devs hearing your criticisms on the durability changes this patch, you were not happy. They have reverted all durability changes to that of previous patches. So basically, weapon durability wasn't changed at all this patch. It's exactly the same as 1.27. Let me know your take on these changes, and of course the loot changes and the new dynamic events. Do you want to see dynamic events on other maps too? See this video for all the other changes to this update. Thank you very much for watching, and have a good day.